Ready to go?
Oh, okay.
I'm not. Hey folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Can everybody hear me in the back? Perfect. We may have other folks speaking tonight that use the microphone, but nobody's ever accused me of being quiet. My name is Eric Mishi. I'm the CEO of SAVE, which stands for Suicide Awareness Voice of Education. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Our goal for tonight's meeting is to bring you up to speed as to the work that we've been doing alongside Kayla's Hope to deal with permanent suicide prevention barriers, but also to talk about our current efforts, which are to place temporary barriers and other deterrents on this public structure. I'm going to use the name of this bridge once in this conversation tonight, the Washington Avenue Bridge. And the reason we're doing that is to try to minimize the idea behind this particular location being a place that is widely regarded as a suicide hotspot. As we look at the work that SAVE does, what we do is focus on suicide prevention through what we call our 4 pillars: education, training, advocacy, and support for suicide loss survivors. And even before we go any further, one of the things tonight's conversation may be triggering for folks. We'll be talking about suicide. And so if you find yourself in crises, please feel free to step out, take a break. If you need to call or text or chat, please plan on using 988. It's free. It is a resource that has trained people on the other end of the conversation. And I would tell you that anytime there's an opportunity for you to find kind of support that you need, somebody to talk to, or if you know somebody who you're concerned about, you're not quite sure what to do, make sure you reach out to 988, let them know what's happening. They can provide you with local resources to help you help those you care about. So as we kind of continue this conversation, I want to set the stage and let you know that despite all of our best efforts, that we have kind of come to what I would say a standstill in trying to secure temporary suicide prevention barriers on this particular structure. We'll talk a little bit about why that has come to a standstill and what it is we need from you to help us move this forward and make sure that these incredibly important life-saving tools are installed on this structure, as well as other potential deterrents that we believe strongly and that the evidence supports can help save lives. And so part of our goal tonight, again, is to educate and raise awareness about the issues that we've been involved with since January, but also to ask you for your help. So when we leave tonight, we've got a couple of action steps that we're going to ask you to support and to help us as we continue this effort to try to help save lives by putting barriers and other deterrents on this structure. So with that, we have are we at this point? Yeah. So we've got a little video here that we'd like to show you, and then we've got a couple of folks we're going to ask to come up and speak briefly. And then we have an individual that we're going to introduce you to who has been involved in a similar struggle and fight in another state and has had success in that journey. So with that.
Hi, my name is MJ, and this is my daughter, Kayla. who at age 29 chose unfortunately death by suicide by driving to a bridge here in Minnesota. Unfortunately, this particular spot is known as a hotspot suicide area for a lot of people in Minnesota.
My name is Jerry, and the picture here is of my younger brother Brian. At the age of 27, he chose suicide at the same location that Kayla chose, except that he did this 48 years ago when that structure was new. This is Officer Marty. My son, Sumit Marty. He exactly 1 year back, he committed suicide.
These past few months to get short-term orders placed on public structures, including the site where people chose to enter life.
We need to make this as public an issue as we can, so that next year and the year after, somebody else's parents are not in a place like this.
Join us October 22nd at the state office here in Bloomington. Help us get our government to understand the importance of placing temporary suicide barriers and other deterrents on public structures.
We don't want any other kid, especially, or any person should lose their life, and then their families and all couldn't gonna go through the same support what we are going through that. So please support us as much as we can. This is a problem that is way overdue for some solution. 48 years is too long. Young people be taking their lives.
So I'm gonna ask MJ, Jeremy, and Ramesh to come up here and just say a couple of words. MJ, Ramesh, Jeremy. Howard, what have you been? We're not.
I didn't get the memo, just 2 minutes. Hi, I'm MJ, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you all could take time out of your busy life schedules to join us this evening. It's hard for me to believe that we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of losing Kayla in less than 3 weeks. Events on this structure, November 9th, 2023, impacted and changed the lives of everyone Kayla touched. The lead up to that event did not need to happen. Suicide is preventable. My daughter Kayla, mother of 2, was so much more than a human being. She was somebody's granddaughter, somebody's sister, aunt, niece, fiance, friend, neighbor, and coworker. She was kind, beautiful, smart, generous, loved to sing, shy with a good hint of sassiness when she needed to. She loved watching the sunrise come up in the morning, hanging out with her family and close friends, and sunflowers. She loved being a mom to Sophie and Abel. They were her world. Kayla missed turning 30 this year. I have no words to say how much we miss hearing her voice and laugh, seeing her smile and her curly hair, just being able to reach out and touch her and get or give a hug. She attended the University of Minnesota College briefly in the fall of 2012. She wanted to be a doctor. Kayla's life choices changed. Eventually, she ended up working at area daycare centers, and she loved the baby room the most. Kayla's life ended early one morning when she took a drive from her Shakopee house to an unprotected area. And the thing about bridges and other unprotected structures is that those in crisis know that they're there. Unfortunately, it is us that are uninformed and in the dark. This is why I felt days after November 9th, as my sister Jean and I gathered data and learned more about the history of this bridge, the dark history attached to it, and noted that the history dates back 48 plus years. And I understand why the location is not discussed in the news and paper. There is fear of contagion, but at the same time, we need to call it out and openly discuss what we know so that more tragedies do not occur. It is time to deal with this now. I'm asking for a call of action, way overdue, from Hennepin County, the University of Minnesota, and our state legislative groups to immediately install short-term barriers with the long-term barrier goals in mind. 2 to 5 people per year, and in 48 plus years, and number is horrifying. I want to know how many more lives do need to be lost? How many more families need to suffer? Who, why, or what is stopping us from these corrective measures? Suicide barriers and other deterrents are important as they greatly reduce successful suicide attempts. Anything that buys them more time by limiting the impulsive means of suicide finds them a chance to see another day, another sunrise, live their darkness, and give them hope. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rameswar Madi, father of Sumit Madi, who is committed suicide. Stepping from Washington Bridge exactly 1 year back. From day one, I have decided I need to do something so no one can commit suicide from that bridge. As you know, me and my wife, along with the MJ journey, we lost our loved ones. After this incident, we can live our lives like others who lost their loved ones at the same location, but we are not. SAVE is helping us to attend meeting with the different officials and lawmakers to achieve our goals. It's not easy for us telling our story to everyone, different committee. Each time we are end up crying. But still we are working on with SAVE to achieve our goals. So we need more support from all of you. Please support us as much as you can. Your voices matter. Thanks, SAVE. Thanks everyone who is attended today this meeting. Thank you.
Brian goes with me. I come from a very large Catholic family with lots of kids and nieces and nephews. We get together regularly for reunions. At this point, we hit 100, literally. But every year, there's still one missing. That never goes away, no matter how many people show up. There's always a hole in our hearts. And it may be hard, MJ, to hear that, but it's the reality. And it's one of the reasons why I'm here. When I read in the paper what MJ and the rest of Kayla's family was doing, I thought I need to be here because 48 years is much too long. And when my brother took his life at that bridge, he wasn't the first or the second or the third. From the day it opened, that bridge was a hot spot. And what made me angry as well as sad is that 50 years later, it's still a hot spot. And people are still dying. So the first and most important thing is that hole never goes away. And so it's so important that nobody else after us has a hole like that in their lives. When I heard about this, I talked to some of my friends. I spent my adult life advocating for people who are vulnerable, including people with mental illness. So I have friends who are professionals in the mental health area. And I asked them about this barriers thing, what they thought of the idea, and they said based on the data and their 30 and 40 years of experience, barriers work. It's as simple as that. Barriers save lives. The third thing I'll say is that in my work life, I spent many hours at the county board and at the state legislature advocating for vulnerable people. And one of the most important lessons I've learned is that you get somewhere if you persevere. You make sure that the people you're talking to understand you're never going to go away. Your issue is not going to go away. People were over there in 2024, they're going to be over there in 2025. And if we need to be here in 2026, we'll be there. At some point, policymakers need to understand that it's easier to give you what you want than it is to have you coming back. It's just getting in your face. And it does matter. You are one of the ways that can make it matter. I know because legislators tell me. A constituent call or a letter means more than the best lobbyists in the world. Because they're speaking from their hearts and their experience, as I am when I talk about my brother. It's not something I'm paid to do. It's something I need to do. And so legislators know that people who call, there are a lot of people who call, but there are a great many more who don't, who feel the same way on an issue. So you're not just one person. You're reminding legislators that there are 10 or 15 or 20 people in their district who care about this, and even more if they knew more about it. So you can help us to persevere and make sure they understand we're going to be there until the barriers are in place. Thank you.
So are we going to Tricia first? Or? So we'll talk very quickly that, first of all, I want to thank Jeremy, Ramesh, and MJ for sharing their stories again and again and again. Ramesh said there's nothing easy about continuing to have to share that story. And I will tell you, it takes a lot of courage to be able to do that every time we're going to stand up here. So we owe a great debt of gratitude for that. So we talked about this issue of public structures, particularly tall structures. We talk about what are the ways that we can help prevent suicide and save lives. And here are some of the measures that people talk about: signage, surveillance, structural barriers, gates, nets, restricting site access, landscaping, and rescue operation training. All of those by themselves are not particularly successful. All of those together can have a demonstrable impact in saving lives. Structural barriers, hands down, save lives. They save lives because they are the most effective means of preventing suicide. As MJ talked about, they interrupt suicidal impulsivity. If you can't get over a barrier, the likelihood that you're going to end that attempt is extremely high. 90% of those individuals who find themselves interrupted in that act are not likely to attempt the suicide in the future. The other part of that is that if you are in a public structure where there are people passing by, having that hindrance there allows good Samaritans, law enforcement, anybody to step in and say, wait, we want to help you. And again, the misconception here, and this is very important, that if you find yourself in this particular attempt interrupted, that somehow or another you're just simply going to go somewhere. Not true. Simply not true. We know that that's not true. So I want to introduce somebody that has been in this fight for a long time. Somebody we spoke to today who was involved in a bridge in Tennessee called the Natchez Trace Bridge, where they fought for temporary barriers. And as Jeremy said, they did not stop. Every time they ran into an obstacle or resistance, they made sure that policymakers and others knew they were not going away. That until this got done, they would continue to be there, they would continue to advocate, they would continue to make sure their voice. So before we introduce Trish, a very brief video that gives you a little update.
Suicide at Natchez Trace Bridge. This week, word is becoming action and safety barriers are going up. News Channel 5's Kelsey Gibbs spoke to one woman who says she lost her son, but says these barriers will help to save many others.
The time is now for some kind of suicide deterrent to go up there. We're at 42 people so far who've taken their lives, and again, just since 2000.
Trish Morell's son, John Miller's name sits on the list of those who died by suicide in Mountess Trace Bridge. He died in 2016.
John was a terrific kid. He apparently developed major depression around 7th grade and didn't tell us. He hid it.
Since then, Morella has been advocating for her son and others. She's the co-founder of the Mountess Trace Bridge Coalition, with a goal in saving lives.
Something's got to be done, and who better than families of those lost to do it? We would love to spare the next family this anguish.
The bridge was declared a public hazard by the state, and now a temporary chain link topped with barbed wire is being installed at the bridge starting this week.
When it comes to bridges, people can say, oh, we got to talk about mental health. Yeah, we do, but we also need to do practical things. We need to, really the only thing when it comes to bridges is a physical barrier.
Morella says she knows this won't stop all suicide attempts, but the barriers will help.
Suicide is often a very impulsive act. If you can just buy people a few minutes or an hour or a day for it to pass, that's what we're doing here.
She admits she wishes it was done sooner, thinking maybe it could have saved her son's life. Morella says she's just glad it's finally getting done.
We don't wish this on anyone. If there's a way to, the feeling is, okay, we couldn't save our family members, we're going to try to save yours.
In Williamson County, Kelsey Gibbs, News Channel 5.
Thanks, Kelsey. There are two permanent barrier design options the public can ask the National Park Service to consider by June 17th. The third option is to
So we have Trish Morello, who's joining us from her home in Tennessee, who wants to just share some words of hope and inspiration. Let's give her a big round of applause.
Hi, everyone. All of a sudden, I can't hear.
Trish, can you hear us? We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. Eric, shall I just say a few words now to start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Everyone, I'm blown away by what I've seen tonight and what I've gotten to know about your organization. I'm very, very confident you will be successful as well. You're nailing it. You're nailing all the right points. I just want to give you guys a little bit of a timeline to give you an idea of what you're in for. I think you're already ahead of the game as far as the short amount of time you've been working with MJ on Kayla's home. We formed in October of 2018, and it was just me and one other person who had lost her sister at Bridge. It was just the two of us in October of 18. We got lucky, we spoke at a few things, there were people in the room who were important people, and they heard us, and they took our message to certain people in government. So we started in October of 18, but by March of 19, we had a commitment from the National Park Service to do something. Our bridge is part of the national park, so we're dealing with the federal government with ours. As I said to Eric and MJ and Jen earlier, dealing with the federal government is tough in one way, but kind of easier for us because we're one entity. And I know guys are dealing with state, county, university, all kinds of entities. But in 5 months, we got the commitment from the National Park Service. They said, yes, we will put something up. Let us get to work. It's going to take a while because we have to do lots of studies, lots of planning. These wheels move very slowly. So we said, okay, COVID hit, that put us back by around 2021. They said, you know what, we're just going to put up something temporary and then kind of kick the can on the permanent down the road. So in August of 2022, the construction on the temporary barrier was completed. So we're talking 4 years from start at nothing to completion of the temporary barrier. So just so you guys know, you know, again, these things take time, but you're so far ahead of the game, I feel as though, you know, you might get this done even shorter. The biggest hurdle is getting them to say, yes, we're going to do this. That's the biggest hurdle is getting the yes, getting the commitment. And then it's holding them to it. As Jeremy said, you've got to just keep your foot on the gas. You guys have to love them. You know, once they say, okay, we're in, we're going to start designing, then just make sure that that keeps moving down the road. You know, something we did that's effective is we went to the University of Tennessee, their civil engineering department, and asked if they would be interested in offering design ideas to the senior class as part of their capstone project. And they did. They agreed to do it. So we had one group of 6 University of Tennessee students for their senior project work on a solution for us. And it was the most, I have to say, it was one of the most rewarding parts of this whole process, was working with the kids. They won an award on campus for this. They got a lot of attention for it. The press loved this idea. You know, their students, in the end, their idea was not used, but it just was another way to create awareness and to show efforts from the community in other areas that maybe people wouldn't think of. So just something you might want to, I mean, you've got the University of Minnesota, so I don't know if they'd be interested. It might be a little too close to home. But I just say, if you're getting discouraged, please keep at it. This has been enormously comforting to me in my grief, as well as my co-founder, Aaron. Our loved ones, you know, for their deaths to not be in vain, and for you to be successful with this, you're working on restricting access to legal means, which is the most practical measure in suicide prevention. It's fact, a barrier will save lives. It is a fact. What other thing can you be working on that can say that? So stay the course, keep fighting the fight. And it's just going to take a few years, but I'm so confident after what I've seen tonight and just reading up on you, you're going to get there. So I wish you the best. I'll be rooting for you. You've got to let me know how it's going. Eric, thank you very much.
Tricia, thank you so much. You're great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, bye all.
All right. Tricia's comments, again, I will tell you, for us who've been involved with this, enormously empowering. Because it reminds us that your voice matters and you can make a difference. It's also important to understand, as she pointed out, the work that we've all done together so far has really positioned us to be at a place where we can make an impact. So we're going to just kind of talk a little bit about what we've done so far to get you up to speed. We spent a lot of time at the state capitol. We were going to have board member John Atkins talk a little bit about what happened during the legislative session and kind of what else we did during that legislative session. Back there's a lot of letters and a lot of materials that show the communication and the outreach that we've been doing to the university, to the county, conversations with senior staff in the governor's office, conversations with the Minnesota Department of Transportation, obviously outreach to organizations like Tricia's and others to help enlist them and to find out what's going to work best to get this done. And so one of the things that's important for you to know as it relates to permanent barriers is the work that we did this last legislative session and how we got so close to getting that done. And so, John, I'm going to have you, John Atkins, who's a board member of SAVE, longtime friend of mine, was a lobbyist at the state capitol for 68 years.
So Jerry is right. It is real people that go to the legislature that actually get some things done. Jerry blew my cover because I am a legislator. This is what I'm a lobbyist, and this is what they look like.
little bit different than other people. I'm gonna do a quick, legislative process 101. Legislative session meets for 2 years. First year we pass the budget, so the government, the second year we pass the bonding bill. The bonding bill is the priority in the second year. That's what we have to get done. The bonding bill was where SAVE focused its attention this past year. The University of Minnesota owns the unnamed bridge that we're all talking about here. And that's why we approached them early on. Once MJ had come to us and said, we need to go talk to the folks who own the bridge and see if we can work with them to get something done. We approached them. They were aware of the problem. They are not unaware of the problem. And they responded very positively to our offer to go up and help them press for money in the bonding bill to fix the unnamed bridge. The problem with that was that the cost of fixing the bridge was about $15 million, and they needed $500 million. And in their list of priorities, we were going to fall someplace. And that's when MJ and Ramesh and Gina and Brittany and Eric and Jerry all headed up to the Capitol and started talking to legislators, one by one, talking about dozens of legislators. These people testified in front of 10 legislative committees. If you think it was difficult for Ramesh to tell a story this evening, you can imagine doing that 10 times. He stood there and he did it time after time, as did MJ and Brittany. And when they got done with telling those stories, we had people who were sympathetic. We had people who were super sympathetic. And we had a number of advocates who were willing to step forward and try to help us get something done. So they went at that for 4 months. And in May, they got their reward. And the reward was $40 million to the University of Minnesota in the bonding and the borrowing bill, and $15 million of that explicitly dedicated to fixing up the unnamed bridge, with instructions as to how the University of Minnesota was supposed to do it. That doesn't happen. The university was not happy about being told how to spend their money, but that was accomplished because of the efforts that they put forward. So all that was left to do was pass the bonding bill, right? That's what you do in the legislative session. Unfortunately, I'll tell you another secret. I used to lobby for the railroads. And May was when the train came off the track with the bonding bill of the legislature. Not only did we run out of time, we couldn't gather the votes together to get the bill passed, and we went home without a bonding bill. And thus began this whole effort to try to put temporary barriers on the bridge. And so we're going to be back at the legislature in the next session. We're going to be hopefully seeing a bonding bill, but we're going to be advocating for getting this done, getting both temporary barriers and permanent barriers put up on that bridge. And all those good folks who spoke to you this evening will be there with us. I know Jerry's been there for years upon years upon years. We're all going back again, just like Chris said we should. Any of you who can come with us, any of you who can call a legislator, any of you who can sign a petition, any of you who can advocate on behalf of getting this done are going to literally make a difference in the lives, literally the lives of the people you save and the lives of the families that love them. So hope you can come and help us. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Before we go any further, questions? Yep.
Are you going to put on the screen who to specifically, like, who are in charge of these bills that we can contact?
So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about who it is we want people to reach out to about short-term barriers. And then what we will do is we will follow up with an email. I think there's a sign-up sheet for everybody with what we're looking for long-term for support at the legislature. For the short-term barriers, which is our principal focus right now, we've got some specific things we're going to ask people to do before you leave. Okay. Any other questions about anything we've talked about so far? Don't be shy. Okay. So the question is, let's back up because there was a slide. So today's status, okay? So today's status of where we're at is that we have made specific proposals to Hennepin County and the University of Minnesota. I want to make a little bit of clarification. The University of Minnesota is responsible for the maintenance and prevention, or maintenance and maintenance, security, and taking care of that pedestrian deck on the top of the bridge. Okay? That's their responsibility. That's their legal responsibility as a part of an MOU, a memo of understanding with Hennepin County, Metropolitan Council, probably a bunch of other groups. Hennepin County actually owns that bridge. When we met with the university initially and they said, we'd like your help to get temporary barriers on this structure, it was with our understanding that they had the authority to not only get that money, but once they got that money that John talked about, that they'd be able to go ahead and do that work. Subsequently, they've come to us now and said, we can't really do anything on that facility because Hennepin County. Okay, which seems a little odd that you would go and ask for $15 million from the legislature to build something and then come back later and say, oh, we don't actually own it, right? So as we've talked to the University of Minnesota about temporary barriers, their response to us is go talk to Hennepin County, they own that property. So I'm going to get back to that piece in a second. We went and talked to Hennepin County. And we said, hey, we want barriers on this property. The initial conversations were very positive. I will tell you, we ended our conversation with them, their public works people, their administrative part, their commissioner, and we were under the impression that they were hell-bent on getting this done. Weeks passed, months passed, and then we were told that they looked at it and that the temporary barrier solution that we proposed, which is a chain link fence, similar to what Tricia and her team did, that has proven to be highly successful. They told us it's too heavy for the bridge. We now have friends of ours in the construction industry that are looking at the technical specs on this structure to determine whether or not that's really accurate. We don't believe that that is a deterrent to putting these deterrents on that structure. We've also been told by both entities that it's too expensive. They don't have the money. I want you to understand that the combined budgets of both of these institutions is roughly $7 billion. We estimate the cost of putting temporary barriers up to be $1 million. You can take out your calculators and look at that, but I will tell you that 0.00, there's so many zeros, okay, before it gets to an actual number in terms of percent. Okay, so we came back to the university and we said, we got another idea. Back in 2008, 2009, because the federal government determined that that structure, the pedestrian deck, did not meet current federal standards for weight and load bearing capacity, you need to shut it down and reroute traffic either away from that, or you need to move it away from the exterior where the railings are. So that's what the university did, is they rerouted pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic through the enclosed portion of that structure. We said you were able to do it then, let's do it now. And the response we received was, we can't because money, because we've been told by the city of Minneapolis that it doesn't meet fire suppression code. There's some ADA issues, and we got concerned because you can't put emergency vehicles on this pedestrian deck because it's not strong enough to hold it. I want you to think about that for a second. A squad car, an ambulance, fire truck, not able to get onto that structure. Put aside anything that has to do with what we're talking tonight, but imagine a medical emergency on that structure. And somebody telling you you can't bring an ambulance out there if somebody's having a medical crisis. It defies logic, common sense. We then came back to, we understand that there's some issues there. We will raise the money, say we'll give you some of the money to get this started. So we have offered to give the money, to raise the money, to provide the technical support, all of those things. And where we sit today is that there are no temporary barriers on the structure. There are no significant deterrents on this structure. There has been no update to any type of signage, and what changes to cameras and other things have been fairly de minimis. So that's where we are at today. The county has told us too heavy, not enough money. The university has told us it's not our bridge, go talk to Henry County. We don't have the money, too many code issues. We've come back and said, here's your three options. Put up the barriers. So I don't know if those are next on the slide, or did I got ahead of myself. We've said, here's your three options. Install a chain link fence or similar barrier, which we believe they could do starting tomorrow. If you can't do that, restrict access to the exterior and reroute pedestrians through the center, which they have proven successfully to do in the past. That is not a brilliant new idea by any of us. And if you're not willing to do number one, if you're not willing to do number two, then shut it down until we find a solution to protect public health. Those seem to be three pretty reasonable solutions. As of this time, again, none of those three solutions have been acted upon. And as Jeremy has said, and as Trish has said, and as MJ has said, we're not going anywhere until something gets done there. And if it means that we got to keep hammering this home and keep hammering this home, we're going to continue to do that, because we don't believe that option one or option two is an impossible task to do. Where there's a will, there's a way. If it's important enough to protect life, we ought to be able to find a way to do this. I have a speech communication degree. I don't have an engineering degree. But in talking to people who are in the business of building things, when we've talked to them and told them, they've told us that chain link fence is too heavy, they look at me like I have a speech communication degree. And so people that are smarter than I am, looking at this, are saying it can be done. So what's next? So we need to continue to increase public awareness about suicide prevention barriers. We did that today. MJ and I did some interviews. I'm doing some more conversations tomorrow with the press. We're trying to be as responsible as possible, limiting the number of times that we mention the name, the location, or anything like that. But as Trish said, eventually the public needs to know. They need to know that this is a public health hazard that is taking far too many lives. You can't not talk about it. You can't fix the problem unless you're willing to take it out of the dark, bring it into sunshine, and say, here's a problem, we got a solution, let's do it. Okay? We need to continue to increase public pressure on Henry County and the University of Minnesota to solve this problem before winter. We had hoped to have this completed before the university came back to school in August. We feel that it is imperative that this get done before winter. And then we also need help to empower this initiative, Kayla's hope, to strategically and financially assist barrier design and implementation. Again, we think the cost of this thing is probably $1 million to put temporary barriers up. If it's not temporary barriers, we think it's probably less than $1 million to put the interior of that enclosure to get it up to code. Okay, again, $7 billion, $1 million. Again, I have a speech communication degree, but even I understand the difference between 7 billion and 1 million. So here's what we need people's help. And before we get to that, I want to ask if there's any questions about what we proposed, what we've heard, any comments, Dale?
The engineers come up with that bridge can take temporary repairs, or is that still in the works?
So at this point, we still have people looking at the technical data and specs that were ultimately provided to us by Hennepin County. So we're waiting to hear from them what options are available. The option that we were told that was not capable of succeeding on that structure involved the chain link fence with J barriers. Anybody? So J barriers are literally these massive concrete platforms that they were proposing that they would put on that structure and then fasten the chain link fence to. I probably, even with the speech communication degree, would probably agree that's way too much weight. However, there are existing railings on that structure along with the concrete base, and we believe that even a not perfect solution is better than no solution at all. And so we believe that there is the capacity for that structure to bear the weight of something very similar to what was constructed on the Natchez Trace Bridge. This is a temporary solution. As Tricia pointed out to us, it's ugly, right? It wrecks the viewscape, but it saves lives, right? So what we want to erect right now is ugly. It's going to wreck the viewscape, but it's proven to be successful at saving lives. Anybody else? Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Any concerns that we do feel, let's say you get the fence,
so the question is if we get temporary barriers up, does that potentially delay a permanent solution? That's a great question. And it's a concern that Trish raised with us today as we talked with her. And her response was, as long as the temporary solution is working and continues to work, then however long it's going to take for the permanent solution is going to be however long it takes. So we don't have the design here that the university showed us, but I will tell you that of the $15 million that they wanted for renovation on that structure, they indicated, I believe, 5 to 7 million was for the barriers themselves, for permanent barriers. I got to tell you, we got data from the Minnesota Department of Education, particularly if you look at the High Bridge in St. Paul, significantly less than that amount. And if you've been to the High Bridge and you look at the barriers that they put in, those permanent barriers are not only aesthetically pleasing, but they don't destroy the viewscape, and they have been proven to be extraordinarily successful in saving lives. So it may indeed delay that for whatever reason, but if it's working, I mean, one would argue possibly that those who believe in aesthetics that say that that temporary barrier is screwing up the viewscape, maybe that'll hasten them to hurry up and get the permanent solution done. I guess our position is, as long as whatever goes up there works, we don't care how much longer it takes you to do the permanent structure. I mean, we'll be there, we'll be advocating for it, we'll want to have input on it, but a temporary solution that's saving lives, if it's got to stay up there as long as it's got to take, so be it. Yes, ma'am.
And we're hearing that it's not safe. Is there any talk about
So we'll start with the comment, this would make no sense to me, because that would be where we're at. The question is that given that we've been told that the structure does not permit emergency vehicles to be put on it, should we be looking at replacing the whole thing? I don't know the answer to that, and I will tell you that our focus is simply on the barriers. Again, I got to say, the idea that you really can't bring emergency vehicles out on that structure just seems illogical. And that's about as far as I can go. I mean, somebody else is going to have to deal with that issue. But what we do know is when we went to the legislature, as John pointed out, the bonding request that the university had was for $15 million. They believed that was going to be the amount that they needed for permanent solution. We went up there and we worked like hell to get that done. And we were pretty dang happy when we got not only the money in both the House and Senate version, but as John also mentioned, provisions in both of those bills that specifically instructed the university needed to use that money for those barriers. Yes.
It would be interesting to see if there's any on that comment, because that's very concerning. So our whole lifespan on this bridge, there's never been a medical crisis or anything that would, cause anybody to go out there. Emergency vehicle?
So that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So to answer, so the question is there data that speaks to that issue that the structure can't support emergency vehicles? It's a good question. SAVE actually requested that information and data from the University of Minnesota's Public Safety Department. And we were informed on Friday that the university will not provide us access to that kind of information.
So it's not public information. What about county? What about, because I don't think any of them own the ambulance and the fire trucks and everything else. Do they have their own campus emergency vehicle structure? Or is this going to be county? And my understanding is it's going to be county. Why would it be public record?
All of this is public. It's not a question of whether it's public record. It's a question of whether or not the institution will provide public record to the public. We've now responded back to the university who indicated that they're not going to provide us with this, saying that they read the statute to give them the authority to prevent us getting this information. We've read the statute that does give them the authority, if they choose to, give us this information, particularly if it's going to benefit public health and safety. So stay tuned on that. But your point is well taken, which is how can you possibly say that when was this built? 1965? I think it was 1965, right? 56 years ago, 1965, right? I know, I'm not doing the right math. I think it was 1965. Okay. But in all those years, one has to assume that there has to have been an emergency vehicle on that. I can't imagine that that's happening.
It's safe to say that the university doesn't care. They've been sweeping this under the rug for years. In 2017, didn't they assemble a task force to actually look at this safety issue on the bridge? And basically they came back and said, no, we're not going to spend the money.
So I want to make a comment, because I don't think the university doesn't care. So I just may disagree. Okay. I think the university cares. I think the university understands that there's a significant problem that needs to be fixed here. I think it's a matter of where you put this in your priority and sense of urgency. Okay. It stands in that sense of urgency right now. There was a story in the Star Tribune earlier this week or late last week where the university has outlined, I believe it's $200 million in infrastructure needs that they have, because throughout their entire system, remember, University of Minnesota system is not just the Twin Cities campus, it's how many, 5 other campuses or something like that, right? Their physical infrastructure is falling apart. I believe it. I've seen it, right? Their bridge got an issue, right? So I don't think it's an issue of not caring. I think that would be, I would say that's a harsh indictment, and I don't think it's accurate. I think what's accurate is to say that sometimes what happens is that in institutions as big as a university, and as institutions as big as have become, okay, is you forget that part of the responsibility of government, and part of the responsibility of public institutions, is to have a duty of care to protect your citizens and to protect your constituents, and in this case, students. And I think that gets lost when you've got attorneys sitting around saying, well, be careful about this, right? You've got well-meaning, long-time institutional members of institutions saying, that's not how we do things, right? As John pointed out, having legislation that specifically told the university how they had to spend their bonding money, that was a really bitter pill for them to swallow. Okay?
The university asked for 500 million. Did they have this line item?
They actually, yes, it's a great question. The question is, when the university asked for $1 billion during the last legislative session, was this in a line item? As a matter of fact, they have part of what they call their HEAPR request, which is the Higher Education Appropriation. There's an acronym that somebody's going to give.
Higher Education Assets Preservation.
Higher Education Asset Preservation Request,
Yes.
HEAPR request. This actually, the $15 million was the top priority. And when that request got knocked down from $500 million to, I think, 200 million, to 100 million, to ultimately to 40 billion, we kept waiting for that top priority to slide down. Never did. Stayed at number priority. Where does it stand going into the 2025 session? We need to find out the answer to that question, because one way or the other, there needs to be money available either for a permanent solution, and if we're not successful between now and the beginning of the 2025 legislative session in getting a temporary barrier up there, there needs to be money for that.
Sorry, I got one more question.
You can have any you want.
Where's the governor's office in all this?
Yeah. I will say we've had very positive, constructive conversations with the governor's office and the senior staff of the governor's office. I would say that during the last legislative session, as we were working to get money in the bonding bill, they were there helping to advocate for that. We've asked the governor's staff to kind of convene all of these parties and get them into a room and say, figure it out, okay? We're still in those conversations. We're going to keep pushing for that. We think ultimately the quickest solution to all of this is getting somebody, a governor or U.S. senator, to pull all these folks into a room and say, seriously, $1 million. By the time I finish this sentence, we've already spent that.
Well, that's what I was just going to wonder. The governor can have a tremendous amount of influence.
Sure.
He's probably going to still say, it's Hennepin County's bridge. They're in charge of it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that that's probably already been said. And the response back to that, to be very candid, I was not nearly as polite, which was, I don't really care whose damn bridge it is, right? We know there's a problem, so let's find the money and the resources and let's fix it, right? I mean, that's kind of a basic premise, right? I mean, I've shared with people, wow, I haven't spent 60 years in lobbying like John has. I spent 35 years in local, state, national government policy. And all of those years, I have never come across a problem so easy to solve that has been so difficult to get done. Hands down, period, end of story. Yep.
This is why I won't be good in government. Not too much time.
I don't know, government being Any other questions before we get to the what can you do and things like that? I don't want to cut off any questions. We covered a lot of information. Before we get to this, I will tell you I am by nature an optimist. Okay, my two most powerful words in my English language are hope and faith. For those of you who don't know, John knows this and other people know this. In 2020, I took a rotted out pontoon Home Depot garden shed on it down the Mississippi River for 2 months, from St. Paul to Baton Rouge. You don't do something stupid like that without being really hopeful and having faith. Okay? And so, even as discouraged as this may feel at times, I have no doubt that this is going to get done. And it's going to get done because ultimately it's about saving lives. And so while we've had a lot of really difficult and challenging conversations with public officials and institutions, I will also say we've had a lot of really powerful ones. MJ will talk to that, Brittany will talk to that, John and Jeremy and Ramesh. When we went up to the state capitol and talked to legislators, right, their eyes were opened up to the enormity of this problem. Their hearts changed, right? They suddenly felt that because this was no longer bricks and mortar. This was about beating hearts and human lives. And so I think part of what we got to do is continue to remind people this isn't about jurisdiction, right? It's not about how we've always done things. It's not about, hey, this is really tough, right? This is about saving lives. And I think the more we talk to those folks and the more we get them to understand that, I have no doubt in my mind we will get them. Right? And no matter how frustrating it seems and how kind of nonsensical it can feel, okay, you got to have hope that you're going to get this done. I mean, the whole purpose behind the name of this effort, Kayla's Hope, is because of that. So I have no doubt that we're going to get this done. We're going to continue to take time, effort, and people's commitment. Okay? Those of us that say we get paid to do this work. Okay? My board that's here tonight, Patrick Klinger, who's in the back, Joy Thomas, who's here, John Appett. I don't know if we got anybody else on the board.
Shannon's on LinkedIn right now.
Jen, who's on
Shannon.
I'm sorry, Shannon, who's a board member, is on board. They don't get paid for this either, right? MJ doesn't get paid for this, right? Ramesh, okay, nobody here gets paid to do this, but you do it because at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. And so here's what it is that we need your help. Today, we're launching literally a grassroots fundraising campaign to raise money to get the resources we need to get this project done. It's to continue to do advocacy. It's to get some engineers to help us continue to understand what our options are. And it's to make sure that we've got the resources we need. And if we've got to fund it with private dollars through public awareness in order to get it done, then that's what we're going to have to do. Okay? We need you to contact your legislators to express your support for suicide prevention barriers on this bridge and beyond. And we're going to follow up with you on that, what that message is. We also need your help to pass a resolution. I'm going to have this, Brittany and MJ, can you pass this out, folks? So one of the things that Tricia and her team did in Tennessee was when they ran into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, they finally talked to legislators and said, if nobody's going to listen to us, we need to make sure people understand that this is a public health hazard. And so what we're going to ask legislators to do is to pass a resolution declaring this particular structure a public health hazard. That's a pretty bold initiative. But if that's what it takes to underscore to people that this is not some ordinary structure. This is a structure, as Jeremy pointed out, 48 years ago, took the life of somebody important to him. 48 years later, took the life of somebody important to Amish, to the MJ, to all of us. And so we will be asking you to share with your legislators your interest in making sure that this resolution is brought forward in the next legislative session. If by some ability that we have to get this done before then this becomes a moot point. But yes,
That bill that you're talking about, you know, here's your funds, $2 million this needs to be dedicated towards the bridge. Where is that right now? Do they get denied? Is it still?
yeah, so both the House and the Senate in Minnesota, in their version of the bonding bill, both had $15 million in each version. What needed to happen was that bill to go to Congress, right? So that they could iron out details, right? The problem is when they came to the end of the legislative session, is they couldn't bring that bill up to the floor for a vote because they had too much fighting between Democrats and Republicans. So the bill just didn't get a vote.
Bill that came up in the 2025 session.
John, you want to answer? So the question is, will it come up again in the 2025 session? Here, you want this thing?
We're hopeful that it comes up to 2025 session, but it's a budget year, it's not a bonding year. And so that's the other part of the reason we're pressing so hard to make sure there's something temporary done, in case they can't accomplish the longer term. So there's two priorities, obviously, both of them are important, but I can't tell you that it's going to be a bonding bill because we need to think that. We know they didn't get to work.
And the addendum to that, John has pointed out before, government can pretty much do anything it wants to, right? So the government could decide that next session, right, 2025, there are so many significant emergencies that require them to pass some kind of supplemental, right, some additional emergency bonding. So it's always possible, right? Again, what we would come back to is that if for some reason we're not successful in getting a temporary solution done before the legislative session, I think we would go to the session and say, you don't need a bonding bill to come up with $1 million or $2 million to do temporary barriers. You can take that money out of the state general fund and make that happen. You can, in fact, in this resolution, it says that if between now and the session it doesn't get done, this resolution would direct the governor's office to pull together all the state agencies and Hennepin County, University of Minnesota, and put them in a room and say, we'll find this money and go get this done. Easy peasy, right? And then, of course, to support long-term and public policy for this and other structures. We talk about lethal means safety. Lethal means safety means things like barriers in public structures. It means things like what we're doing, which is distributing cable gun locks so that you put those on your guns, right? To make it safer so that if there's somebody in crises, right? Or even kids, right? It's working with folks in the agricultural community to make sure that pesticides and other chemicals are secured and stored away. Making sure that there's lock boxes in homes so that there's not opioids and dangerous prescription drugs, right? So part of what our job as a suicide prevention organization is to look at those areas where we can help impact and save lives. Lethal means safety is clearly one of them. So when we're out there advocating for barriers of public structures, that whole concept fits into what we call lethal means safety. And what we have now done within SAVE is all of those lethal means safety initiatives fall under what we call Kayla's Homes. And so this doesn't just end with this public structure. There are other public structures in the state of Minnesota that we know for a fact also pose a public health hazard. We got to get this one done. We got to get these temporary barriers up before we move on and continue to move upstream. You got anything else here? So these two QR codes, the one on my right is what we will start sharing beginning in the next couple of days throughout the country and throughout the state, asking people to help support our efforts to put temporary barriers on this structure. So if you're asking what you can do, if you got a few bucks, you can scan that, give us a few bucks. If you got a lot of bucks, it's a lot of bucks. The QR code on the left, you scan that, will bring you to a page where you can put in your address, figure out who your state legislator is and which district you're in. Okay. On the back are 2 sheets of paper, or there's a document that has the contact information for every member of the Board of Regents, as well as every member of the Hennepin County Board of Commissioners. Okay. So you will receive an email from us here in the next 48 hours asking you to communicate some basic messages to each of these groups of policymakers. Hennepin County is to ask them to put up temporary barriers now and to get it done. University of Minnesota is to ask them to support that effort, and in the absence of that effort, to ask them to reroute pedestrian and bike traffic through that enclosure. The University of Minnesota has the authority to do that. They don't need Hennepin County permission. We've gotten that directly from the university itself. Okay, so those are the types of things that we're going to be asking you to do. If you have a social media page, got Facebook, Instagram, whatever, hit social media of your choice, please make sure you share that information out. Okay, make sure you talk to your friends and your neighbors. If you know somebody who you think would be helpful to this effort as an advocate, vocal proponent of this, let us know. Because every voice in here can change somebody's heart. Okay? Unequivocally. Every voice in here can change somebody's heart. And for some of this, that's what we got to do. We got to change people's hearts. We got to get them to understand, again, this isn't about money. This isn't about what we can and what we can't do. It's not about a code. It's not about the way we've always done it. It's about saving lives. That's all this is about. Anything I missed? Is that so? Any questions? Any comments? Anything that you look at this and you say this makes absolutely no damn sense what you just said? Yes, ma'am.
It makes sense because I'm good at that way up. I'm just wondering, like, who are you guys impact? Everyone understand, like, okay, that person is like, you guys know, like, the construction engineer, like, that you guys talk to, but like, just kind of thinking, like, what areas you guys need help in, like, people who
So great question, right? Who are some of the people? So if you have friends in the construction industry, if you have a friend who is a civil or structural engineer, right? If you know somebody at the University of Minnesota who is a professor or a dean, you know somebody in the administration at the University of Minnesota. Okay? All of those are folks that reaching out to them and making your concerns heard. If you've got somebody who's an engineer, a civil or structural engineer, who you would talk to and say, I want you to talk to SAVE, let them know and come give me a call. I'd love to talk. Okay. Again, if you know somebody in the Hennepin County Commissioner's office, if you know somebody in state government, or if you know somebody who knows somebody, talk to them. Okay, is let them know that this isn't a problem that's too difficult to solve if we're willing to just focus and solve it. And so, and if you have questions about if there's somebody that you think you know that could be helpful and you're not sure, feel free to reach out to me. Okay? Just don't hesitate. You know, I learned a long time ago that There's a lot of people out there that are smarter than me, that are smarter than all of us individually, that collectively, there's people out there that can bring something to the table. Let's get them at the table. Yes, sir.
What about, you know, having, I'm sure at the University of Minnesota, there's gotta be some type of mental health awareness group, you know, within the student community and stuff. You try to reach out to them for help at all with this?
So as of today, we have not activated that outreach on campus. I will tell you, as we continue to move this forward, engaging with those voices on that campus has to be a part of it. I will say that, you know, when we started this, so much of our focus was on the permanent solution, right? And so the advocacy that we were doing at the Capitol seemed to be moving along in a very positive fashion. Okay? And so when we got towards the end of the session, we were pretty optimistic. Now, when the session ended and nothing happened on the bonding bill, one of the things that became really apparent to us was that whether that bonding bill passed or not, there was still going to need to be temporary barriers on this structure. John, you can correct me if I'm wrong with this, but by the time they pass a bonding bill, to the time that there's a shovel in the dirt, can be 2 to 3 years. Because they've got to pass the bonding bill, they've got to issue the bonds, they've got to let the project, all of these kind of things. So there is no such thing as passing the bonding bill and the next day they're doing construction. So whether the bonding bill passed this year or passes next year, there is no escaping the fact that there has to be temporary barriers on this structure. Just, you can't get past that. So getting back to your question, building additional capacity for advocacy from the very voices that are being impacted most directly on this has to be part of our next steps. All right, MJ, anything you want to add before we?
T-shirts.
What about t-shirts? Wait, Margaret's gonna say.
I'm gonna use the microphone, I'm not as loud. If you like these shirts and you would like one, if you could just come speak to me afterwards, make sure that I have your contact information. We don't have any currently, but we'd love to hear if there's more interest in these. So come speak to me afterwards. And then Eric mentioned getting an email about additional information. So if you RSVP'd on our website, put your email into a form, then I have your email. But if you didn't do that and you came tonight, we've got a QR code back there that says stay in touch. And that's where you scan to give us your email. If you hate QR codes, I can take your email too. So there's a lot of QR codes in this room, but stay in touch is the one you want. If you want to be getting that information from us, follow up wise. And then if you did an RSVP through the website, give us your email at that time.
Yeah, so please give us your contact information. We've got a lot of talents. One of them is in marketing and ESP about this here. So please give us that information. MJ, anything besides t-shirts you want to share?
Thank you for coming. This is what we need to do to get together and be a voice for loved ones and lost and the life that we don't want to lose. So very important. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. Gary?
You said it all.
Real quick, I want to introduce my team here who has been working nonstop on this issue. Brittany Sitzer, who was involved with this before it came to SAVE, who is our Director of Education and Training. Josie Jerezik, who is our Marketing and Communications Manager. Margaret Blundell, who is our Business Manager. And Jen Owens, who is our Director of Programs. We can't do what we do without the help of the community out there willing to go out and make a difference. So on behalf of all of us, on behalf of our board of directors, on behalf of those that we're all going to get together and help make a difference and save lives, thank you for being here. Okay.